What is up, everybody? It is your girl, Tamala Baldwin, and you are tuning into another segment of Becoming Love. And today we are talking about a purpose. Now, I know that purpose is something that you hear all the time right now on social media because it's very popular and it's also very important. Like, why am I here? What am I doing here? Why did God give birth to me? These are questions that we need answers to in order to live a life that has direction, that has focus, that has fulfillment and love. And today, to help spark and drive this conversation, we have the creator of Soul Happy Life, the one and only Brenda Rivas.
Hi there.
Thank you so much, girl, for being here.
I'm so excited and honored to be in your energy, in your space, and sharing with your beautiful audience. So thank you for having me on.
You are so welcome, lady. Now, I know personally that, you don't really like to talk about purpose. You call it soul actualization. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. So it really comes from this idea that, I think we all have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he talks about being self-actualized. And so I say, instead of purpose, because purpose is just one of those cliche words that I think a lot of people use, but maybe they don't even know what it truly means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's really about being soul actualized, right? And I really believe that at the core, that's what everyone wants, right? We all want to feel like we're doing our work. We all want to find meaning in our lives. And so I use soul actualization.
I love it. I love it. Because a lot of us are confused. I mean, look at the freaking world today. A lot of us are kind of, especially in the past. First of all, it's a very new phenomenon that we have the luxury of entertaining what our soul wants. Historically, people had to freaking survive or fight just to get food. We were dealing with other things like, civil rights in the past. But now everyone in America anyway has the freedom to really think about what their soul needs. So from your perspective, how did you become actualized? Are you actualized?
Okay, so many great things there. So before I forget about this point, I'm still self-actualizing. I am still soul actualizing because I think it's one of those things that it's not a destination that we arrive at, right? It's always like we're in process. It's something that we're always working through. So, but you make a really great point. I think that there's a notion that's been around for a really long time called survival, right? And so, it was my story as well. Like, how can I think about really being actualized when I'm just really trying to get by, okay?
Yes.
My light's about to be disconnected. I cannot be thinking about soul purpose or actualization or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I get that, but it's such an interesting idea because the more that we stay in survival, the more survival that we get.
Preach, tell it.
And that was my story. Like, I was in survival forever, right? And I actually remember being really happy and proud of myself. Yeah, I'm a survivor, right? Yeah, I can pay my bills. I have, negative 67 cents in my checking account. But you know what? Everything got paid.
Yes,
And so
that's real.
that is very real. But you know what? That is also the trap. That is the trap. So living to survive gets you survival. And so the work in this process is really moving away from survival. And it's hard. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell the audience that, oh, just, think differently and it's going to magically work out for you. Thinking differently is a big part of it. But the other part of it is that you have to be different. And so how can you, show up different in the world and thrive and live a soul happy life while your mind and your being is still stuck in survival? So it's one of those things that really requires conscious work. Like, you really have to work at it. And it's one of those things that also evolves with time, right? And so that's the answer, right? The answer is it requires time, it requires focus, and it's really you thinking your way out of survival into being who you really are, right?
So I just want to chime in really quickly, and I feel like I can talk to you because I think that, you've had an experience that a lot of my other guests may not have been able to bring. And you said something like people, you have to be different in order to create different circumstances. Now, let's say you grow up in an environment where you don't know what different looks like, and this brings up the whole nature versus nurture environment, like how come some people can choose something different even though what they see is, complete opposite. So I guess, like, if someone only sees one way of being, how do we get them to shift to something greater?
Yeah, again, so powerful because I'm just going to be really real here. I'm going to be who I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
I sugarcoat this. And it can be a very lonely place when you have grown up in a certain environment and when all of your family members are just kind of, they're just thinking lower level emotions and thoughts, right? And so really the first thing is that you have to understand that you're going to be in this world, in this little new world that you're creating for yourself. You're going to be there alone, right?
Mm.
And so one of the things that helped me to really claim this new way of being in life was understanding that in my family, I was going to be I was going to be the teacher, right? No, I didn't have it all figured out. I still don't have it all figured out unless I
Who the hell does?
yeah, but what I've come to realize, and I've claimed that position in my family, that I'm the one that has been chosen. I'm the one, and you know what? I have been chosen, but I also accepted that, right? I
Mm.
accept calling. And so, yeah, there's a lot of times where I would say 95% of the time, I don't really have a family member that I can call and just get advice from, right? Because they're still in the old thinking paradigm. So it's this idea that you're choosing to rise above, but you're also understanding that in this choosing to rise above, you're becoming a teacher. Your family members, your close friends, they're going to look at you and say, wow, you know what? She's changing. She's not the same. I like this new unfolding in her. I want that for myself as well. Right. And that's what I find in my current day to day is that I come across not just family members, but, everyday people who I say, I've had a really hard background, right? But I chose to rise above that. I chose to be different. That's the work. That's part of the work.
Okay, so I'm gonna share a little bit of my experience right now. This is the first year that I'm actually a college professor, and I strategically decided to work at a school where the students come from a low-income environment, where they may be the first person to graduate school, but it's also just a really bad environment. And I spoke to one of the students, and she told me that, Tamala, I'm overwhelmed because my family may have to go to shelter, or like we may not have food to eat, So it's hard for me to sit there and talk to her about her purpose when she has the weight of basic needs like that, like not knowing when she may eat, and I feel kind of like stuck. Like, what do I say to that? How can I talk to you about, being different and honoring your soul when you're thinking about your realization, your reality?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, so that's my story as well to a certain extent. It's like I was a teenage mom and, how could I think and how could I think that I could possibly be different when I was dealing with all of these, things that I had created in my life, so much drama, right? And so that's the idea. The idea is that it's not one or the other. The idea is that it's both.
Mm.
That you look at your situation and you got to handle the situation. Like if you're talking about whether or not your family is going to have food that evening or not, well, yeah, you can't just sit back and and think it differently, right? So it's not one or the other. And I think that that's a big mistake that a lot of people make, right? So they say, well, look at my circumstances, they're not that great. Like I don't have time to be thinking about being so happy, right? And so that's where we can grow. We can grow by saying, this is my current situation. I'm going to handle it. But simultaneously, I've got to get out of this situation. So what can I do to handle this? but then also change this, right? Where we go wrong. And I'm telling you, I have goosebumps right now as I'm
Yeah.
telling you, because that was my experience. For such a long time, I chose to survive, right? And that's all I did. That's all I did. I chose to survive, and I felt really bad about myself and my circumstances. Like I had a pity party every night, right? And that's where I went wrong, because I could have, dealt with the realness of my situation, but I never asked myself, how can I change this?
And how
Right?
and what was your, I guess, epiphany, like breaking turning point? Like when did you say I'm going to choose differently? Especially if you had, all those other struggles or responsibilities as a young woman.
Yeah, I love that question. And it makes me feel really tender inside, because that what you just asked me, that's a question that I would always say to, like, once I had the awakening, I would say to myself, like, why didn't I think like this before?
Yeah.
I would just be angry, right? Like, why did so many years stuck in this situation? And so for me, again, going back to how I grew up, and I really grew up not so much in financial poverty, but in extreme mental poverty. I mean, just extreme mental poverty. And so what
What does
can I
that mean to you, like mental poverty?
So it just means like really, really low level thinking, low expectations. Like all of the girls in my family were all teenage moms, right? So we all just kept repeating the same process. We just did what everybody else was doing. And so low expectations, just things like that, right?
Hmm.
Money issues, relationship issues, just those kinds of things where it was just a low spirit, low energy, no trust, those kinds of environments, right? And then finally, it was like the Great Awakening, right? And the awakening, right? You have to think differently. And what did that even mean? Like, I didn't even know what that meant, right? And so I think one of the really big lessons here is that spirit will talk to you when you're ready to listen.
And you were ready.
And I was ready. And what made me ready was that I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? I was sick of complaining. I was sick of going from mistake to mistake. And then what I realized was it wasn't even so much about the environment. Yes, I grew up in a really um, unchallenged environment, but it wasn't even the environment. It was the thought process in the environment, right? And so I started reading, because back then I couldn't afford anything, right? I couldn't afford to buy any training, any programs, or anything like that. So I just started to read like Tony Robbins books. I read all of Iyanla Van Zant's work, everything.
Hmm.
I just started reading different things like that. And that really started to change my mind. And then I kept seeking and seeking. And then that led me to discovering positive psychology, which really, really has helped change just about all of my beliefs.
So was there a person in your life that kind of guided you towards those books, or you just found yourself one day reading a Tony Robbins book?
Yeah, so this is going to sound so corny, but it is. Okay. So no, there was not a person, like a physical person in my world. It was Oprah.
Oprah, good old Oprah.
Yes. So every day I would watch, the Oprah show, and this is where she would always interview all these people, and that's really where I started to change, was watching the Oprah show and reading her things, and that's the truth. I didn't have a physical person in my life that was mentoring me.
And so once you had all these books, that was teaching you or planting the seed to think positively, how long did it take for you to have that shift? Now, I ask that because sometimes we try to rush consciousness, we try to rush our growth, and that ish does not happen overnight. Like,
No, no, you're right. No, it didn't happen for me overnight. But although although it didn't happen overnight, it kind of feels like it didn't take forever either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the reason why I say this, because each new thing that I learned helped change one thing at a time, right? So even though it has taken me so many years, right? I was a teenage mom. I was in a marriage because, you know, my background is Latin, and for Latins, like, you know, back in the day, if you got pregnant as a teenager, like, you were done, right? You were going to get married and that was going to be it. Yeah. So I was married at 18 and I had a kid, and my husband at that time beat me at least once or twice every week, right?
Whoa.
And so it was just so much that I had to overcome in my mind. So that's why I say, like, it feels like this took forever. But I think when I really look at it with perspective, like, I could have still been in that, right?
So, so when you were reading all those books, were you still in that abusive environment?
I was, yes. Yeah. I allowed that for 6 years of my life. For 6 years, yes. But I credit, you know, everything that I was learning. I really credit that to just creating that ability within myself to say, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to accept this. And
How
that,
did, how did you let it go? How did you release that traumatic situation?
oh, wow, that's such a great question. You know, I got to that place where I was able to learn how to love myself. That's it, right? Because when you don't love yourself, then you're so easily influenced by others, right? You know, someone says, do this, and this is what you do, right? When you don't love yourself, it's like everybody else's needs and wants come before your needs and wants, or sometimes your needs and wants are not even on the board, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so for me, it was really about saying to myself, I love me more than I love this relationship.
So what does it mean to love yourself?
Yeah, so it means that, you know, and that's, I love that question as well, because I think especially as women, we're taught that if we love ourselves, like, we're selfish, right? And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, people deal with that, especially like in my family environment. Like, you know, some of my cousins will say, I don't know how you can put yourself first, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they associate that with being selfish, right? And what I say is, well, if I don't, you know, if I don't take the time to love myself first, then, or let's just put it this way, if I take the time to care and love for myself first, I can be a better mother, a better wife, a better, you know, sister, cousin. And so that's the distinction, right? Self-love just means that what's important to me is going to be at the forefront. And research actually says that when we do that, we actually are happier people.
I asked that question because I feel like there is this part of our culture that is teaching us that to love ourselves means to accept our accomplishments. Like, oh, love yourself even if you're a size 14. Love yourself if you know, and to me, that's not quite self-love. I think that's just acceptance. I mean, and acceptance is part of self-love, but I definitely think there's a distinction. Like, you should love yourself even if, no matter what, you know, it shouldn't matter. Any external environment should not dictate the self-love, you know, and I feel like that part is missing in the world right now. What do you
Wow.
think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I think that, and so interesting that you bring that up, because that's not at all like where my mind goes when I think about self-love. And I agree with you, right? Because I think the way that you described it, that just really teaches girls especially to settle, right?
Mm.
Kind of like, okay, so if there's this thing about me that I don't like, well, I'm going to now love it, even though I really don't love it. Because I'm supposed to love myself, right? So that's not where I'm coming from. When I say self-love, it's loving yourself enough that you're not going to do things because other people are influencing you to do things, right? Self-love to me means that I'm going to know who I am, what's in my soul, and I'm going to act from that place, right? And that's just going to make me this person that just has love for myself, but then also has love and compassion for others. But I'm coming from the standpoint of, how can you be compassionate and loving of others when you're not giving that to yourself?
And we are so hard and critical of ourselves.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so, and you're right, it's cultural, it's what we're taught as little girls. And it's this idea of, either you settle and you do what everybody else is doing, right? And so the mindset shift is, I'm going to really do what's in my heart, what's in my soul, and that's going to make me a happier person, which means that now I can be happier in society, right? And so I think that makes happier women, period.
Yes, yes, yes. How did you know what you wanted to do? Like, you're free, you're changing the way you thought about who you were and the possibilities that were available to you. How were you able to discern what you really wanted to create and cultivate in life?
Yeah. Oh, wow. And that's, so much had to be released in order for me to get to that place, right?
Mm.
I went from being, a teenage mom and a teenage wife to really settling into what my parents said, what I had to do, into what my husband said I had to do. And so that went on for a really long time. And then when I had that awakening, some things shifted for me, right? But then what I realized was, yeah, you know what, this has gotten better for me, but I'm still like settling. I'm still surviving. And for me, that was such a scary thing to actually come to realize, because I had already built a whole life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had married again. I had 2 more kids, and now I was a mom of 3, like mortgage bills, like things were real now, right?
Yes.
So how can I sit here and have this conversation with myself and really admit to myself that how certain things of my life, the way that they're flowing, I'm not happy. Like, it just doesn't make me feel good. And I fought that. I fought that within myself, and I actually remember having arguments with God, like in the shower,
I am the queen of arguing with God. I used to be.
Yeah, and so the voice was there. Like, the voice just kept saying, like, you've endured all of this for a reason. Like, you need to, be out there and sharing this. And I was so mad.
Yes. So what would you say? You'd be like, enough. What would you say? And like,
Just like that. Like, seriously, like, I would say, no, like, are you crazy? Like, talking to God, like, are you crazy? I have a family. I have bills. Like, I'm not 20 anymore, right? And so what is this thing that you're asking me to do? And I fought it. So for about 3 months, I knew what the voice was saying. The voice was saying, you need to change your career. And so for a long time, I actually helped entrepreneurs with marketing. And so I had a small marketing agency. And I did that for 7 years, and it was very successful. But I kept hearing the voice, that's not the work.
And I do marketing as well. So I know that it probably was stable and it gave you a sense of security.
Absolutely. And then when you're hearing the voice that says, shut all of that down. So here's the thing with this, right? So I could go on with the story forever, but I'm not. Here's the point, though. The point is that I had to trust and I had to surrender. And that was one of the biggest tests ever in my life, right? Because I had to allow myself to move into that place where I trusted that everything was going to be okay. And I didn't at first. I had to move into that, right? But a lot of it was this, combination of all of these positive psychology practices that I had learned in my training. But then it was also integrating spirit, right? So it wasn't one or the other, it was both. So positive psychology taught me to broaden and allow myself to be in a growth mindset. And then the spirituality taught me to just lean in, surrender, and trust that everything was going to be okay.
Okay, so about that. Sometimes when you surrender, you think that everything is going to be laid out for you. And that's not how spirit works. So how were you able to teach yourself not to worry about, especially with the mortgage and bills and kids? Like, so you're surrendered, but there's still, it's like
Yes,
ambiguous, like what to do next, you know?
absolutely. So you ask all these amazing questions.
Thank you.
So when I decided that I was going to surrender to what God was sharing with me, I didn't just, say, okay, tomorrow I'm closing my business. I prepared myself financially for that.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
So I gave my clients 6 months notices. And so I did everything orderly, right? Because I still had to, pay bills and stuff like that. And I still needed to feel that a little bit of safety, right? And then, of course, my husband's looking at me like, what?
I love
Are you crazy? So I did prepare myself for that. But here's what I did every single day. Actually, and I still do it. So I ask, right?
Mm.
Really, really good at, which I wasn't at before, was asking for direction. So it literally is my prayer in the morning. So God, what do you have for me today? Right? So God, here's the dream that you planted in my spirit. Where do I need to go today? Where do I need to look? Who do I need to call? So I'm always asking, especially first thing in the morning, right? Sometimes I also ask during the day, but so here's the thing about that. It's understanding that, and it's this relinquishment of control, right?
Mm.
And it's being able to discern and ask and then be obedient and take action, right? That's the biggest thing that has changed for me. And I never did that before. I never, ever did that before. I wanted to be in control of everything.
And and surprisingly, the idea of control sounds compelling, but it's so much more freedom when you relinquish it, and just
Yes,
trust.
yes, it's a sense of relief. It's a sense of, um, I almost feel weird saying this, but it's my truth right now. It's like knowing that it's this inner knowing that I'm not making a mistake, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not coming of me, right? I'm now in this place where I am asking for guidance. I hear it, and then I take action on it. So how could that be wrong?
Yes. And I guess that's a really big part. Sometimes I feel like we ask for God, but we don't really anticipate that God's going to respond. So is that something that you have to develop as well?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I missed out, back when I was younger. And going back to something that you said, when you were talking about your student. So this is what I'm talking about. It's the idea of um, taking care of the reality, but then asking for guidance. Like, how do I undo this? Right? How do I take care of this situation right now? But how do I, move on? And how do I get out of this situation? And that's what I didn't do in the past either. Because this is what I would say: God, I need to pay the light bill. Like, help me.
Yeah. We can all relate to that. Like, the phone bill's due, like it's past due. So,
And so where I went wrong was, God, I need to pay the light bill. And can you show me how I can get out of this situation? See, I forgot to ask for that latter part.
mm,
And it just took all this anger. Like, God, why did you bring me into this world to suffer so much? Right? And then I heard the voice, well, you're not asking, right? You're asking to help me, to help you survive the moment. But you're not asking how can I help you evolve into who you really are,
yeah,
right? And that's the difference.
yes. Um, Speaking of evolving, sometimes you're so caught up in those mundane things like the light bill, the phone bill, that we become riddled with worry. And that can also stunt or block out spirit communing with us. Now, someone that talks about soul actualization, what tips can you offer to someone that is overcome with worry and anxiety and just simply cannot trust? Like, how can they know God that intimately to just remove that?
Yeah, I love that. So for me, and what I teach my clients and students, it's actually a combination of both. So a combination of the spirit and it's a combination of the science, right? So in the science, we say, okay, what's the belief, right? So in this worry, what's really the belief? So let's say, for example, someone is struggling to pay their light bill. So what are you thinking about that light bill? Is the belief that I don't make enough money to pay my bills, or I'm a disaster with money, I don't know how to budget my money, or whatever, right? So the first step is to really isolate the belief behind the worry, right? And once you have that belief, let's take it to court, right? And what that means is let's look for evidence for and against the belief, right? So is it really true that you're a disaster with money? Right. So, I really recommend you literally take out a piece of paper and just write down the evidence for and the evidence against it. Right. And then once you can see that, you can really take the belief to court and say, oh my God, you know what? I'm not a disaster with money. Right. The real thing, what's really happening here is that I have more months than money coming in. Right? So then that leads you to ask a better question, right? Better question is, what can I believe about this situation, right? So it's always the being, the believing part. And then the follow-up question is, what can I do to change this situation, right? That removes us from the victimhood, right? And then the spirit part is trust, right? So now I've isolated the belief. I took it to court. I showed the evidence for it and against it. Now I know what I can believe, the truth about this situation. Now I know what I can do about this situation so that I'm not in victimhood, feeling sorry for myself, having a pity party. And then the fourth part is just trust and surrender.
I love it.
Yeah. And so that, wow, what can I say? Because I was like, a huge worrier. I worried about everything, and, to this day, like when my kids are going to go somewhere with their friends, and I sometimes I tend to worry, and then I'll just go through that process, right? And then what I realize is, oh my God, I'm worrying because I was believing that they don't know how to take care of themselves when I'm not around, right? So is that true? No, it's not true, because I have taught them and they have shown me that they do know how to make wise decisions, right?
Yeah.
So that just, and then I just go into trust. Okay, God, I'm going to trust that my kids are going to be safe. And then like this peace just comes over me.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I mean, the peace that comes, again, when we surrender and trust is so profound. And that's pretty much why this podcast is here, is to help people transform their limiting beliefs to something that may be more in alignment with their greater good.
Absolutely. That's so true, because it's not about being Pollyanna and, like this, which, by the way, so that's the thing, that positive psychology is not about that. Positive psychology is not about like walking around like everything is perfect and you don't have any problems at all. That's not what it's about. But it's about finding better ways of thinking about the situations in your life. Because when you can think about the situation in a higher vibration form, then you can create a solution that's in higher vibration. Right? Yeah.
So I want to go back to soul actualization. Like, I deviated a little bit to talk about, worry and all that jazz and my student. So let's say I am someone that is ready, that has made the decision that I want to experience my greater good. What other tips can you suggest to for someone to become clearer about that, about becoming actualized. Again, I know it's not a destination. I know it's an evolution. There's no place to go, but any other additional tips you want to add in that regard?
Yeah, so this is really interesting, right? So this is one of those things that, so let me give you an example first. So this is kind of like the woman who is constantly worried about money, and all she thinks about is about money. So it's almost like, so how can the blessing arrive when all you're doing is thinking about what you don't have?
Mm.
So once you shift out of, and it's really not hard, right? You can say to yourself, I'm in the process of creating a new experience with money, right? And so when you are, so purpose is not one of those things that you can't find or that it's hard to find. Like a lot of people come to me and say, I've been looking for my purpose for 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, and that's the issue right there. The issue is that you're looking at self-actualization or purpose as something that, you know, is so distant from you, that's hard to find. And so that's where we start. So we start with understanding that, first of all, self-actualization is not related to money. So a lot of people think that, you know, this is going to be a money maker.
That is so important. And when you don't hear that often when folks talk about purpose.
Because a lot attach purpose with money, right? And so here's the thing, it can be, of course it can be, right? But what about the woman who realizes that her life's work is to be a foster mom? So where's the money in that? See what I'm saying? So self-actualization is more about meaning than anything else, right? And so again, I'm not saying that, you know, that once you align with your purpose that you don't have an opportunity to monetize it. Of course you do. But what I'm saying is that's not what we lead with, right? With meaning, right? And so one of the ways that we can really know that we're not self-actualizing is how you feel. So a lot of people feel like there's something missing, right? A lot of people feel like there's this dissatisfaction within themselves that just doesn't go away, right? So it might feel a little less and it might feel a little more during certain times, right? Another really great gauge to figure out if you're not self-actualizing is actually envy, right? Yes, this is a really juicy one, and here's why. So a lot of people will look at the work that other people are doing out in the world and they'll feel envious about it, right? And so here's the thing, behind envy, we feel envious when we think that we cannot have, be, or do what that person has become, right? That's really what envy is.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a misconception also, right? So envy actually can be a really good thing if you look at it from a different perspective, right? So if you say, God, you know, I'm feeling envious about Tamala, look at what she's doing with her life, look at her work, right? So that's a sign. That's a sign that your soul is craving to be actualized in that manner as well. So it's not, I can't have that. It's now asking yourself a better question. Like, so who do I have to be and what do I have to do to self-actualize in that way as well? Right? So to go back and answer your original question, it's really with first hearing the signs within you. Like, you know, is your soul clamoring to be heard? And, you know, it's kind of a funny question because the answer is always going to be yes. Right? But a lot of people don't stop to ask themselves that question, right? And so when you ask yourself that question and you hear the yes, don't look at it from a perspective of, I can't have that, right? Look at it from a perspective of, who do I need to be and what do I need to do in order to align with my soul and be self-actualized, right? So that's the opening.
So we're running out of time like usual, but envy is such a juicy topic. And when you mentioned envy, I definitely agree that envy comes up when we think that we can't have it, we can't actualize it. And that is a limiting belief that is based in fear. But how do you know that that is not an ego trigger? You know, like I'm looking at her or you being like, oh, she's married, you know, like, you know, she got a husband twice and I'm still single. And maybe I'm envious of that, you know, like that I can't get one husband. But that can be an ego thing as opposed to like something that is deeper. So how do you differentiate between ego and between, I guess, true meaning and true spirit?
Yeah, that's such a phenomenal question, because you're right. The ego can sometimes trick us into thinking that we want certain things when that's not what we really wanted. And actually, I get a lot of women that come to me with that very same thing. Like, you know, I went down this path because, you know, my sister and my cousin, this is what they did. And I thought that that's what I wanted. And now that I have it, like, I'm completely unhappy.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm in living hell. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually very common. And that's exactly what happens when we make those decisions outside of ourselves, right? When we don't know a process for actually going in and hearing our soul's calling.
Mm.
That listen, there's no easier way of doing this. This is something that you go within to find out, right? So if you see someone online who you're like, oh my God, you know, like I would love to be her. Okay, great. But go within and ask yourself the questions. Like, what is, you know, what soul, what is it? How do you want to self-express, right? This is the missing piece, right? And this is what I refer to as going outside of yourself to find the answers, which is all about ego, actually.
Yes.
Right? So when you go within, you're never wrong. The problem is that we tend to skip the going within, right? So in my world, when I'm working with women, this is the problem. So they went and so, okay, I saw you online. You looked amazing. I want to be like you. So here's what I'm going to do.
Mm.
And that's the problem. It's not the doing. It's really going within and figure out the being, right?
Mm.
The right questions. And then the right answers come up, right? And then you might realize, oh, what I really liked about Tamala's journey is X. But this is not, you know, the way that she's self-actualizing is not exactly how I'm going to do it, or how I want to do it, right? And so that's how we give birth to our own personal journey.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. That makes it so much clearer. You know, we always try to move without spirit, and that's where things get jacked up.
Exactly. And then, you know, so here's the truth, right? So I work with women of all ages, but I have to tell you, a lot of women in their 50s and in their 60s, they come to me with the very same issue, right? So they don't say it like this because they don't know what it's called yet, but basically what they're saying is, I went outside of myself and created a life that doesn't even match who I am. Right. And so I would say, like, for the younger audience, so this is how you avoid that. This is how you actually do the work and self-actualize, soul actualize in the way that you're meant to, so that when you're 50 or 60, you don't go back and say, wow, like, yeah, this life that I created, it's not horrible, but it's not me.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. So we are almost out of time. So what are your last 3 golden nuggets that you want to share with people that are listening to this message? Any last little gems, Brenda style?
I mean, you know, it goes back to what we were just talking about. So, you know, our society nowadays is fast, and it's so hard to sometimes miss the fact that the answers are within, right? It's so much easier to just get into action and this is what I'm going to do, right? And I can say this was one of the mistakes that I made as well. And it's been, you know, it's something that shows up in my business constantly in my coaching practice with my clients, right? So yeah, like I just jumped into the doing. And it really begins with the being, right? It's really about examining the current self, your current self, and understanding that in between your current self and the soul happy self, there's growth.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of people tend to go directly, they want to go into the soul happy self without realizing that there was all this work, right?
Yeah.
They didn't want to do the work anyways, right? Because they just wanted to just jump over and start enjoying an amazing life, right? Here's the thing, it's not about how long it takes you to do the work. For some people it's shorter or it's longer. That's not the point. The point is that there's always work. There's self-growth work that's always required. So let's not try to skip that.
Yes, that's so important. I mean, I'm one of those people, I'll admit it, I'll be real. Like, I kind of want to just get to, the other side,
Yeah,
especially when I'm going through it. Like, when I'm going through, like,
right. Exactly. Yeah, and it's so true. And I know that we're running out of time, but so here's in hindsight, and I've healed already from asking myself, like, why the hell didn't you know this before when you were in your 20s?
hmm
So
hmm
I healed from that. But in hindsight, if I would have done the work when I was like in my late teens and 20s, I would have avoided so much hurt and pain and struggle and dysfunction and surviving, right?
yeah.
But I didn't want to do the work, partially, because I didn't know the work. Didn't
hmm
know the work, right? But for the younger audience, there's always this work that's clamoring to be done, that's going to really help you propel yourself into that soul happy life.
Oh, I love it. So tell people how they can experience more of the luscious, divine, beautifully delicious Brenda.
For that. So you can visit my blog. It's thesoulhappylife.com. And once you arrive at the blog, I've got some great articles that are also a combination of spirit and science. And you'll be able to sign up to hear from me weekly. And then we will build that relationship and we will take it from there. So thesoulhappylife.com.
Well, lady, thank you so much. It was an honor, like spending the past, few minutes talking to you about purpose and soul actualization and just everything. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, girl. Yeah, girl. And everybody listening and watching, thank you so much for being here. Until next time, know that spirit is within you, turn within, and you are loved beyond your wildest imagination. Over and out.